Welcome to Grit and Gravitas with Ann and Annie, bringing you savvy, spirited stories of success. We're excited to deliver 30 minutes of inspiration, impact, and goodness. We'll be bringing you guests and friends from around the country who have very special work and personal journeys. I'm Ann Deeter Gallaher, your co-host with Annie Carnathan, and this is Grit and Gravitas. Let's go! It's High Gear Friday. Woo!
TGI High Gear Friday. We're doing it again.
We are.
We're going to get after it today.
There's a lot of stories we're going to unearth with a very special guest.
One of the most profound, important women I have had the privilege and the pleasure of knowing. She's already wincing. It's like, come on, Annie. So we have in studio today Amy Beamer Murray.
Woohoo!
I'm good with the Murray now. Takes a while after so long of Beamer.
You and me both.
Right? And Amy, just real quickly, because we want to get to the good stuff. So Amy is the Chief Operating Officer and partner of Pavone Marketing Group, which is a series of agencies, all of which cater to a niche.
Big mover and shaker.
Big mover and shaker. And I met Amy 29 years ago when she started with Michael. And at that point, his former partner.
Run there for 29 years.
So loyalty, right up there with one of my most valued traits. And so Amy, when I said to Ann, we have to have Amy as one of our earliest guests, you know what Ann said? Oh my gosh, her cards.
I did.
And Ann and I could do an entire show about how important we think it is to write notes, to write to people. And virtually as long as I have known you, you do that so consistently. And to me, so profoundly. It's like a horoscope. When you send me a card, I read it thinking, how did she know? And I've said this to you. Like at the points to which I get what you wrote to me, I think that was, what would I have done without that? So can you talk around a little bit? And it's not just me. Sure. It's been Ann. It's been almost everyone you touch.
Absolutely.
And so what happens with that? Because that's what I think of when I think of you, and so does Ann.
Well, that'll be my tombstone for sure. When people gather when I'm gone, that's what people will remember about me. They may remember me as a business person or something else, but the cards will be sweet. The cards will be the thing, and they'll have them. Like if people choose to keep them, they have them forever. So I've always done that. I mean, I've always loved doing that. It's a passion of mine. It's an obsession of mine. I'm a little, I take it to an extreme sometimes, but I think it's so important. And I think it's a lost art. Mm-hmm. And, it's easy to shoot off a text or send an email or whatever, but it's like to take the time to write the note, put it in the mail, and give someone, just that little bit of a break or a little bit of a breath in their day, I think is super important. And I think as we age and as we get through different life stages, you go from celebrating weddings and births, and then people start getting divorced, and now people are starting to get sick, unfortunately, and they're losing parents. And we're in sort of this mess where we're, trying to raise kids and, trying to deal with aging parents, and people have a lot on their plates, and women have a lot on their plates. And I think sometimes you just have to reach out and say, hey, I hope you're having an okay day. And if you aren't, it's okay. Like there are people that have your back, that, that want to see you do well. And, yeah, I mean, if that's the thing that I'm known for at the end of the day, I'm perfectly okay with that.
I see this orbit women have where things are crashing into each other. There's no air traffic control. Women just have an extraordinary amount of constant big decisions, little decisions that they have to make. And what we do with our time is the biggest vote of all. So not only do you do that with your time, you've done it as long as I've known you. And I get the giving part. I get that better than anything. But what does that really do for you? Because to do something, Amy, that consistently for that long, that profoundly from your heart, you know, the vulnerability that you're accepting by sending that from your head to your heart out into the world, to me, is stunning. I mean, it's breathtaking. And I do it. Anne does it. We're absolutely aligned in what that means. But what do you think that's done for you in doing this for so many years? What is it about Amy that makes that so consistent and so profound?
I mean, I think when I think about it as a form of ministry. And I was just going to say that. And I don't mean that in the religious sense of ministry, but I think that it's my offering to the world. And it is the thing that I believe can make a difference in people's lives. I'm not in a financial position where I'm donating millions of dollars to causes and that sort of thing, but I can impact people individually in that way. And I'll say when I turned 50, there was all this talk about, hey, let's have a big party. Let's do this upright. And I'm like, I don't want a party. I reached out to people and I said, send me a birthday card and write something about me and you in the card, something we did together, a memory you have. And this was across from cradle to where I am now, across work, across college, across high school, all that sort of thing. And I will say, when I did that, I thought I knew what I was asking for, but when it came back and I sat and I started to read the cards, I'm like, I'm getting a preview of what the end looks like, of what my funeral looks like. Yeah. And I literally, first of all, I got like 350 cards, which was amazing to me. But then secondarily, I could only read like 10 at a time. And I'd walk away from the pile and just be like,
so emotional.
I have to, and I would get anecdotes from people saying, hey, I remember when you gave me this piece of advice and it really changed my life. And I'm sitting there, and I mean no disrespect when I say this, I'm sitting there thinking, what was that conversation and when did I say it? And I think that's the thing that stops you in your tracks and says, wait a minute, like, I'm having an impact. Like, there are things that we go into, big meetings, big clients, that sort of thing. And you're like, I have to have an impact.
You have a big job.
I have to have an impact here. But what you don't realize, and I'm sure this happens as a parent too, you're impacting every step along the way. There are no gimmies. There are no throwaways. You are having an impact, positive or negative, with every interaction that you have with people every day. I believe that. And the goal is to be the best part of someone's day.
And I don't think in retrospect that you ever understand fully, because we don't sit there and reflect. I'm not a rear view mirror person. I got too much coming at my windshield, to keep everything on the rails and in my lane. And when I look at that, I think, holy smokes, to your point, you got to sit there and go, here's the sum total of every seed I've sown that had a true, meaningful, real connection. Because there's some people that now that's I'm assuming that's wallpaper too. And I go back and read everything you've ever sent. And not only does it become more meaningful, it becomes more profound. And I'm not, I should be more emotional. So it's not to say I'm not, really out there, but just now, like, I felt sort of the lump in my throat, and I'm thinking, I'm going to have to keep, so like, what is going on here? Like, I have tears in my eyes. And when you look at that and what you've done, like, we don't ever really get that payback, if you will, in terms of that feedback back. And one of my Achilles heels, I think, if someone's not telling me how they feel about me, they must not feel anything. What? It's not remotely true, but it's how I'm wired. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm constantly telling people how I feel. Because I feel like if I don't, they're not going to know. And how would I ever reconcile the not knowing? And when I look at you, who is someone I can't say enough about, we're very different. Our styles are different. Like I'll be volatile to you on the phone. Yes, yes, that's, yeah. And I think, whew, but you know where I'm coming from. And I go out of my way, it has nothing to do with you. You know, we're in the same business. And so I think there's just a uniqueness and a specialness to you that constantly connects, even though our styles and so much is different. But this profound connection that means the most to me is always there. And as women, we can agree to disagree on the style, on the way we communicate, on what we do, on how we see things. But if there's enough common connection, yowza, 350 things come back to you.
Absolutely.
We talked earlier that we're in the connection economy. And I think especially in the midst of the pandemic and coming out, your relationships are really what has been our lifeline. And the fact that you're making sure those in your life or in your orbit, not even your closest friends, you're going out several layers to make sure that they know, what you've noticed about them, what you think about them. We're in the word business. You run a significant creative agency and you also deal in data, but data has narratives with that. And so to tell someone, and maybe it's in a working relationship, maybe it's an employee, maybe it's someone you met in the community, exactly what you feel. My father's last words to me were, honey, you'll never know how much I love you. And we as a family, we said, oh, Dad, that's wrong. We more than knew. You said it many, many times. No one in your orbit's ever going to say, I wonder what Amy thought of me. Because they will have these cards and they will know those sentences will change a person's trajectory. We talked about that too. You can be in a deep valley. And we as executive women, we can't really afford to be in deep valleys very long. People are watching us. Clients are watching. We're on the front line. And they take all those cues from, does Ann really know where she's going? Does Annie know? Does Amy? You know the way, Amy? We got to follow you. Those types of words, when someone sends a card, it's just like, oh my gosh, I can do it. Today is the day. I got this battle. And I think probably, even though you receive 350 cards, you probably have no idea of the deep and wide impact you've had.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's great to hear. And I'll say one of the projects that I started at the beginning of last year, I decided, I had read a New York Times article that says that the average American receives less than 10 pieces of personal mail a year.
Wow.
Absent of Christmas cards, absence of birthdays,
but
literally less than 10 pieces. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, because I send out stacks every week. I send out stacks of cards.
Praise the
and
Lord
I'm like,
for me.
That's a ridiculous statistic. So I made up my mind. I said, I'm picking 100 women. And I said,
wow.
I'm going to send you a card every month. So you're going to get 12 cards from me.
Oh, my word.
And I started that. And some cards I just sent the card, hey, hope you're doing well. Some I included letters about things I was thinking about. But I did that pre-pandemic. And then we hit March. So I had done January, February, we hit March. And, when this started, we weren't really sure where it was headed. And, right. And I just kept going. And I couldn't have envisioned where that project was going to lead because of the pandemic. But the feedback I got in December when I said, well, I'm wrapping this up, I got like, keep going.
They probably said, where do I sign up?
Please keep
we
going.
We need another 100.
Now.
But you also got, oh man, like you don't know how much it meant to me, or you don't know how this helped me
absolutely
navigate this year, or because everyone was feeling different pressures. And I think, we're not far enough away from quote unquote the pandemic to really decide what the positives are coming out of it. But I think one of the things that I'm excited that people are talking about is the idea of resilience and mindfulness and having that place to go that allows you to ground yourself and, and endure. Because we have to bounce, to your point earlier, we have to bounce. And resilience is, can you bounce and how high? And, we all are carrying heavy loads, and you've just got to be able to do that. And there's something to the people who can do that and to the people who struggle with that. And you've got to look around and look at the folks in your life and in your work and say, okay, who's struggling? Who's really having a hard time? And how can I put some bounce back in their ball, so to speak?
I call it my ticker tail.
Yes. I love that. I've heard you say that.
Bounce and bounce and bounce.
And sometimes all it takes is to know that someone, has been thinking of you or is on the same journey or believes in you. Sometimes it's only one sentence and you're, energized and you do your little self-talk for confidence and say, I do have this. Because there's not a line of people out the door that say, go, 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 ladies, go.
Sure. Well, and I read a lot, and I read a lot of nonfiction, and I read a lot of memoirs. And the chapter of the memoir that's always the most interesting to me is the chapter when someone talks about how they overcame.
Yeah.
How they failed and bounced back.
Come back.
It's easy to talk about the successes. Like, people will say you learn more in your failures than you do in your successes, and that's absolutely true. But the chapter, I'm always interested, how thick is the chapter about the failures? Because a lot of times people gloss over that in their story because they don't think that it's significant, because they're telling you where they ended up, not how they got there.
Yeah.
How they got there is what's more interesting to me.
And that's the grit of this. This is that resiliency. This is that setback comeback, because if you're out there, it's going to continue to happen. It's a journey, not a destination. I think what COVID did, one of the big things for me is I didn't know I needed some of the people I needed. And if you're me saying, hey, I don't really do that well with needing people. and listen, there's not an ounce of attractiveness in not being needed. There's an enormous deep currency for being needed. And now I'm more prone to sort of at least pack an overnight bag and go, hey, could I stay? Just metaphorically speaking.
Sure.
And can you carry this bag for me for a little bit, because I'm in my head, I can't get out, and it's foggy. For me, if it's foggy, it's dark. And you just broke through that and just like, okay, not only do I admire her, respect her, love her, I need that. And I communicated that to you, and you don't know the vulnerability it takes for me to say, I needed that. And I'll never forget it, and I'll look back at our podcast launches. How did we do that? How did we find time to do that? And I'll look back and say it saved part of my life. And you've just done that over and over and over again. And I marvel at that. And of course, it through my lens, it means so much. So what we're trying to say to women in businesses, if we're us, right? If this works for you, put 2 sentences in a card and send it.
Absolutely.
Send flowers. That's the other lost art. I mean, I
have that covered.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We have fresh flowers every episode.
They're very pretty.
We sent my mom Valentine's Day flowers because she lives alone. She's 80 years old. And I say to Walker all the time, our son, if we're not telling some of these elderly people we love them, who is? And I love that about him. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Best grandma ever. Best, whatever. And so whatever that looks like, to do that, how hard is that? Online flowers? I don't know. I have it down to 90 seconds.
I was going to say it's super easy.
Super easy. And what Amy did to me, who already did that, made me appreciate that more. So what did I start to do? I started to write even more.
Well, you're both fabulous at it.
And there's something about the connection, my head, heart to paper. And someone said the other week to me, well, you do that, but I tell you, I go, yeah, but I can't reread you telling me.
Yeah.
My dad's an English teacher. Probably had to write before we got to speak, but it's just in business, to your point, it takes to write 2 sentences. And in the beginning, it was like, oh, Amy's thinking of me. That's really, really cool. And then it delved into now where I think it was one of those sparks that just saved my life at that moment.
And I want to throw out here, we're not just speaking about women doing this. My youngest son, Benj, who's the country artist, he will write handwritten notes if he's at a writer's retreat. If he's met a new radio personality, he will write a handwritten, thank you. The words that you added to the song are incredible, or those things too, in an industry that maybe, isn't overwhelmingly handwritten notes, are so meaningful. You just rise.
It's recognition too.
When it stands out. Yeah. And I think, and men appreciate it. Like I'll say, I make a point of sending, I'll send Mother's Day cards to all the moms in my life. Aww. I send Father's Day cards to all the fathers in my life. And I'll say the mailing of Father's Day cards to the men in my life, whether it's people I work with, whether it's friends that I've accumulated along the way, I get more feedback from that.
Wow.
Because they're saying, oh, thank you so much for taking the time to recognize. Because, hey, if you're a mom, if you're a dad, that is the most important job in the world. Like all the other things that we're doing, our greasy kid stuff, that's important. And I think, you've got to recognize that. And I worry sometimes that they get overlooked, or, it's June and hey Dad, we're going to have a barbecue and there's no card or whatever.
Here's your tie, or maybe not.
Yeah. But, I get a lot of feedback that they appreciate that. So
another interesting part of you is you're the chief operations officer. When you hear the word operations, you think of organization, process. It's clinical. Mm-hmm. It's, to me, cold. That's not how my brain is wired. And you couldn't be more of the antithesis of that. Mm-hmm. And you essentially have taught me, and again, I'm big on this. It's sales isn't who I am. It's what I do. But by the same token, it's almost matched perfectly. If you could match, my traits and my qualities, my superpower. And so how is there room for both in terms of that compassion you have, that consideration, that diligence to your emotional communication to people? So that's really what it is. It's an emotional outreach.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think when it comes to process, process is something that you put on paper. People are what bring the process to life. And so it still is a question of how do you encourage people? How do you guide people to follow a process that we believe is going to lead us to success? And, we've been at this for 29 years and people will say, oh man, you've worked the same place for 29 years. And I'm like, no, I've worked at about 6 different agencies. They all had the same name, but there was the startup. There was, I'll be honest, my favorite time of the agency was probably when we fit in 2 cars. That was the golden time because it was still small enough to manage, and then, we've grown along the way to the point where we're now almost 100. So there are these sort of, I almost look at it as life stages where, okay, we were a child, then we were an adolescent, then we're a young adult. Now we're moving into maturity and it's starting to, we've had to grow up. And that's the life cycle of the business. And we've had to evolve with that. And I think it is the evolution. I think it is the idea that anything is figure-outable, if that's a word.
I love it is now.
It's the title of a book, and I have the book, but it's everything is figure-outable, and I think that's if I look at what motivates me, the biggest motivation anyone can do is to tell me that something can't be done.
Yeah,
because I'll figure it out. It might not be right the first time. There might be 2 iterations of it afterwards, but we can figure it out. And we've all been in those situations where you're just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? That's one of the ways that Annie, you and I became friends was, we were in that startup phase, back on Rose Street. And, I would call you and say, hey, can we do this? Is this possible? And it's well, let's talk about that. But, you've got to ask, you've got to ask the questions. You got to move, you got to just keep moving things along and figure it out.
In 29 years, there's never been the same day twice.
No.
Just like there are no
Never.
two exactly alike people. And to me, as long as I'm growing and I'm challenged and I see sort of, to your point, that's there and people say, oh, you can't get there. And I've spent an entire career doing that, of either being counted out or, she can't do that. Oh, she's made, I went to Universal and there wasn't a single person that goes, you did what? You left this broadcasting career and what? And so that iteration again of having to go from 2 or 3 to 100.
Sure.
And getting the right people in the right seats with the right chemistry, because media and advertising is really collaborative, as is PR. Mm-hmm. And chemistry is as important as skill sets. And to get all of that right to continue to be able to grow. And I look at you as the glue at PMG, at Pavone Marketing Group. And everyone has a role and does it exceptionally well. Mm-hmm. And so 29 years later, which is even hard for me.
I know.
I'm on Rose
Oh, my
Street and I'm
word.
calling Amy and I'm going, okay, like I was like a homing pigeon. I'm like, I'm like, I have to be right here. And it was like a bat door. Like, and then you went up all these, this is my
yeah.
recollection, right?
We were
of up all
in an
these,
old
and I'm
brick
thinking,
warehouse.
I didn't even tell anybody where I'm going. Cause as a sales rep, you're not supposed to go like in a home alone with someone, in a trailer, and you do all that stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I heard Michael and his partner then in the back, and there was Amy, and I goes, is there just the three of you? Just go, yep. They do this and I do everything else. And I was like, okay, I'm going to help you because I'm a giver, right? I'm like, what did I know? 2 seconds worth at that point, but I'm going to help you. Right.
Well, and that was the thing. Like I say to Michael every so often, I'm like, can you imagine starting a business now when now that there's the internet? Like
Right.
when I literally had a path to the state library.
Oh, I know.
Like, because it's like, okay, we need to figure out how to do this. Okay. And I go off and find a book or an article and come back. And
Now it's called Google.
Yeah. And the snarky side of me is like, now when you have the, and I'm not bashing millennials by any stretch, but they'll say like, I couldn't find anything out on the net. And I'm like, I bet I can find something on the net.
But you just bubbled up another really critical trait to me in business is humility. Mm-hmm. And it's almost as important to say, I know what I don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
As
I was
to say,
always very good at that.
Oh, I knew that. And we three have that in common. And I'll be on a call, regardless of what it's for, or we used to say, old school in a meeting. And I'll stop and say, I really don't know the answer to that. And then I'll ask someone else on my team. And then it's like, we'll get back to you because, wow, I think we limit everything by saying we know it all. Mm-hmm. We limit every single possibility because no one can.
Sure, absolutely. And I think in our business, we've always relied on young people as an industry. We've always relied on young people culturally to be current,
Fresh
and fresh eyes, talent, all that sort of thing. And, there is a level of humility where you sit in a meeting and you have a 25-year-old telling you something about digital media and you're like, I don't know that. Like and they do, and that's great. And we can collaborate and I can,
That's why we have them.
Right.
And I would say that's not my brain and you can't be in my brain and I can't be in yours. And that's the best team, And so I think, Amy, if we're going to wrap this up and that's how quickly it goes by.
It does go fast.
It goes as fast for the listeners as it does for us having this conversation.
I can't say that it's been unpleasant.
We tried to guarantee you that, but boy, we just don't ever know. Ann squirms a little bit every show, for where we're going, which is we don't know where. So what would be your one takeaway for today? Because we absolutely have to bring Amy back.
Oh, yeah.
We have
She's
to bring
full
Nancy
of,
back. Two guests, we have to bring them both back, right?
You're full of business vitamins, and that's our deep desire is from our career trajectory, how do we give back to legions of younger people, men and women? So we ask everyone, would you share a high gear piece of advice to others who would be listening or watching on video?
I would say, mine's multi-phased, I guess. I would say you have to show up. You have to be prepared. You have to be present. You have to listen. That's sort of the basis of it. And then from a business standpoint and a longevity standpoint, I would say nothing is ever going as well as you think it is, and nothing is ever going as badly as you think it is. And if you can stay just in the middle, stay calm, eye on the prize, stay focused.
Perspective.
I think that's the thing, because it's easy to vacillate. And I think, you know, in today's time, I think we have, the paradigm has changed. I always thought that my value was created by taking complex things and making them simple. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people now think it's taking simple things and making them more complex. And I always am trying to drive back to that simplicity. And
no one's going to raise their hand and say, I don't understand, I can't follow you. What? Nobody's going to do that.
Right. So, I mean, I think the simplicity piece is super important as well.
Interesting that nothing you said requires a 4-year degree to master or to really assume today. Anyone listening, we can't say, well, if I really went to college, then I would have been where Amy is. All of the powerful skills are the soft skills, and they're things that you can really start today.
Show up and listen.
Amy Beamer Murray, 29 years at Pavone Marketing Group. In this life, I was loved by you. And so there's no greater compliment I can pay. And thank you for the time today.
Absolutely.
There's so much more we need to do, but we need women to listen to the show, to share it, to subscribe, to make sure that we're doing what every woman sees as the most beneficial takeaway from this. So thank you so much.
It's a great thing that you're doing. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. I'm writing a note card today. That's what I'm doing.
I'll be doing mine tomorrow.
Oh, I know that. I know that.
Have a high gear day. Thanks for listening. It's our desire that these stories will bring energy, ideas, and fresh thinking that you can use today. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram, and have a high gear day.